My sister and I kept noticing the same thing. Every woman who visited our neighbor looked completely confused when she left. We had questions, so we introduced ourselves, and he didn't seem surprised when he opened the door. It was late, and I was about to go upstairs when I saw something through the front window across the street. His bedroom light flickered on, and he wasn't alone. I stopped in my tracks, one hand still on the banister. A woman stood near the window, half-dressed. She leaned into him and put her hands on his chest while he stood there, calm and still as if he had all the time in the world. "Lena," I called out in a low but urgent voice, "you need to see this." The blanket was around her head, and her hair was all over the couch. "What?" she asked. And I pointed and said, "He's at it again." She sighed and said, "Come on, Abby." "No, seriously, look." She hesitantly walked over to me, but when she looked out the window, her eyes grew wide. Through the glass, we could see everything. Her back was against the wall, and he leaned in and whispered something. She laughed, then went quiet as he slowly lifted her thigh and guided her closer. "We shouldn't be watching this," I said with a smile, and we both stood there motionless, pressed up against the window like teens spying on something they weren't supposed to see. He moved slowly, as if her reactions didn't surprise him anymore. She clung to him, her head rolled back, and her legs were shaking before she even moved. When he turned her around, she grabbed the frame of the window as if it were the only thing holding her up. Lexi asked, "Is that the same girl from last week?" I told her, "Nope, that's a new one. 5th or 6th this month." Lexi shook her head, but her eyes didn't leave the window. I whispered, "That's crazy. They walk in laughing and flirting and leave looking like they've just been through something they'll never forget." We watched her tense up again, this time with her mouth open, jaw slack, and eyes fluttering. He didn't move at all, but whatever he was doing had her holding on like her whole body was reacting to it. Lena turned away, upset. "Okay, I didn't move, and you can't lie and say you're not a little interested." She sat down on the armrest and pulled her blanket closer around her. "I mean, he's impressive," she said. I said that man is a walking mystery in his mid-50s. He never brags, and every woman in this neighborhood leaves his place feeling like they just stepped out of a dream. Lena bit her lip as I smiled and asked, "Do you want to know what that's like?" She laughed nervously. "Oh, I'm very serious." "Not tonight," I said. "But tomorrow I might go over there, say hello, introduce myself, knock on his door, and ask for a sample. Maybe I'll borrow sugar," I said with a grin. Lena stood there, her blanket still clutched tightly. "You're crazy," I said. "But admit it, you're wondering too." She didn't answer. She just pulled the blanket tighter and looked away. When I woke up the next morning, I still couldn't stop thinking about him. What was it about him that made every woman so scared? Lena, on the other hand, pretended like last night hadn't happened at all. She was still in her pajamas and curled up on the couch with a bowl of cereal, as if nothing had happened. I leaned in the doorway with my arms crossed and said, "I'm thinking now is a good time." She didn't look up in time for what you know what. She sighed already, making sure you were serious. She groused at Abby, "You can't just knock on a man's door because you liked what you saw through his window." "First," I said, grabbing my keys, "it's not just what I saw, it's what I've seen repeatedly consistently, and last night that sealed it." Lena pulled the blanket over her head. "I'm not going, you don't have to do anything," I said. "Just come with me, back me up, maybe pretend I'm borrowing something." She peeked out. "Why? Do you even want me there?" "Because I said walking over you'll keep me from doing something too bold, or you'll pressure me into doing something stupid possibly," she said, grinning. "But either way, it'll be fun." She rolled her eyes, but I could tell she was folding when she stood, arms crossed tight. I tossed her a hoodie. A few minutes later, we were crossing the street. My heart thudded, not from nerves, just anticipation. Lena stayed a step behind me the whole way. I knocked. Once the door creaked open, almost immediately, he stood there, barefoot, shirt halfway buttoned, hair still damp from a shower, and the way he looked at us like he already knew exactly who we were, like he'd been wondering when we'd finally meet, like he already knew why we were there. I didn't miss the way his eyes moved just once from me to Lena, then back again, calm, measured, like he'd been waiting. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. Sorry to just show up, we were out for a walk and figured might as well say hi. Lena stood just behind me, arms crossed, hoodie pulled tight like she wanted to disappear. He nodded. Once, nice of you to stop by. Where Abby and Lena, I added, across the street. I know that was all. He said nothing more, but something in the way he said it made it clear he didn't buy our excuse, and he didn't need to. He stepped aside. We walked in. The house was warm and still filled with soft light, and the faint smell of coffee. Music played somewhere in the background, slow, low, like it had been on for hours. On the counter, 2 glasses, one already full. I raised an eyebrow, expecting someone. Not really, he said, just figured I might have company. I shot Lena a look. She pretended not to notice. He handed me the glass. I took it without hesitation. Lena hovered near the door, still unsure, still quiet. You're not what I pictured, I said, taking a small sip. Neither are you, I smirked. And what did you picture? His tone didn't change. People who watch that closely usually avoid eye contact. The next day, Lena flinched. I didn't. You saw us. It's a window, he said, not a one-way mirror. I laughed, quiet and sharp. He dropped onto the edge of the couch like it was nothing, arms resting on his knees. Lena still hadn't moved. You can go anytime, he said, gently looking her way. No pressure. She didn't answer, just stayed where she was, eyes flicking between us. I leaned on the back of the couch facing him. You get a lot of fake excuses at your door. He looked up at me and smiled, calm and sure. I leave the window open for a reason. I didn't back away. I got closer. I leaned against him, one leg draped casually across his lap, fingers resting lightly on his shoulder. He didn't move, just let his hand settle on my thigh like he'd been expecting me. Lena's voice broke the silence. You're actually doing this? I looked over at her, who was still standing near the door. You act like I dragged you here, she said. Well, I kind of did. Then go, I told her. Or stay and admit you're not just here for me. She shook her head. He's a stranger. Abby, I told him that he was the one who made every woman in this neighborhood leave his house looking like they forgot what year it was, including the one we saw last night. He raised an eyebrow, and I tried to make sure they wouldn't forget me. Lena jerked, but her eyes didn't change. I slowly got up and grabbed her hand. She stopped moving, and I could feel her heart beating faster in my hands. You don't have to do anything, I whispered, but don't lie to yourself either. Then I led her forward step by step until she was right in front of him. He looked up at her with a calm, steady, unreadable look on his face, and then leaned in and kissed her. Lena let out a shaky breath when his lips touched hers, but after a heartbeat, she pulled back, her face red. I didn't hesitate. I stepped in, kissed him without hesitation, and made it clear what I wanted. He moved his hands steadily to my hips, and when I leaned back, neither of us said a word. I reached for the hem of my dress, and he matched my motion. We slipped out of them like it was nothing new, and I moved closer to him while my hands stayed on him. I paid close attention to every change in his body, like how his shoulders tensed up and his grip tightened a little on the cushion. I wanted to feel everything he was holding back behind me. Suddenly, he looked past me and offered a hand. Lena stood there holding her dress like a shield, unsure of whether to move forward or leave. He didn't say a word, just nodded. She moved slowly toward us, wary but not fighting, and he kissed her again, this time gently. She didn't pull away, and his hand slid behind her neck to ground her while his other hand helped ease the dress off her shoulders. It fell without a sound, and her breath followed. I kept going, letting the rhythm guide me. Lena joined me on the floor, but she was still unsure until he touched her cheek and led her with calm confidence. When his head tipped back a little, I knew we were making progress. He spoke in a low, steady voice, and the two of you stood up. He slid further into the couch, resting his arms wide. I climbed onto the cushions, straddling him slowly, and shifted until I was exactly where I needed to be. As soon as his lips touched my skin, my grip tightened. His movements were deliberate, focused, unhurried, and endlessly skilled. I tilted my head back and breathed through it. Lena lowered herself again, and I watched as she picked up where I left off. As I guided her gently, her hands found their rhythm, and she became more confident with each step. We moved together with a common goal, and his attention didn't waver. Each step built on the last, sending waves through my legs and tightening everything in me. Even though my balance was off, I didn't want him to stop because he was so close to undoing me. Lena sharply breathed in, and he touched her to encourage her to stand. She stood and let him lead her into his lap, where his hands steadied her at the waist. I took a step back and ran my hand along her spine as she sat down on top of him. She closed her eyes and let gravity do the rest. She moved slowly, adjusting with each move as his hands supported her, one on her back and the other on her hips. Her breath turned uneven, her focus locked on him. She leaned in, gripping his shoulders for balance as her movements grew stronger than her body tensed. Her head fell against him, her back arching just enough to show us everything we needed to know. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. He held her a moment longer, then stood with her in his arms and carried her to the cushions, lowering her with care. Then he turned to me. I was already ready, facing away, breath already shallow. He stepped behind me and took hold, guiding us into a rhythm that took over without hesitation. His hands were sure, his pace steady, but firm. Lena lay nearby, watching through half-closed eyes, still catching her breath. I smiled at her, then the pressure shifted. I gasped, grabbing at the couch for balance. Every second pulled me deeper into it. He knew where to go, how to keep me right on the edge. When he angled just right, my back arched, and everything inside surged forward. It hit fast and clean, shaking through me. I leaned forward, eyes shut, barely held together by the pace. He kept steady still. He didn't slow down. If anything, he was just getting started. He turned to Lena, gently lifting her once again, and laid her flat. She barely had a second before he joined her, moving with even more urgency. I knelt beside them, wiping the sweat from her brow, trailing light kisses along his shoulder and chest. Lena's hands searched for mine. I held it tight. She moved with him again, and faster this time. Her body responded easily. Rising to meet him, she gripped the cushions. Her breathing shifted. Her reaction grew stronger with each moment, building, not stopping. I watched her closely, amazed. He kept going, focus fierce, somehow tireless. His stamina didn't just impress, it overwhelmed. It felt like he could keep going forever, and part of me believed he might at last. He let out a quiet breath against her neck as he reached his limit. Lena lay completely still, chest heaving. I curled up beside them, brushing strands of hair from her forehead, my own body still buzzing. Then I leaned closer and whispered with a grin, still think it was a bad idea. There was no longer any awkwardness in the room. It was peaceful. A soft morning glow crept in through the curtains, warming the wooden floor and casting golden light across the couch and cushions. The three of us were tangled in a stillness that felt like a heartbeat. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Lena's cheek. She smiled gently and closed her eyes. Finally calm, I rested my head on his shoulder and traced light patterns along his forearm. There were no more questions to ask or games to play. There was only presence. Lena turned slightly toward me, her voice a whisper. I didn't think something like this would feel safe. I looked at her and saw someone whose guard had dropped completely, not just because of him, but because of the space we had created together. I know I said it softly, but it does. He didn't say anything. His arm wrapped around both of us in the evening. The three of us sat on the porch with mugs of coffee for him, tea for me, and hot chocolate for Lena. We watched the wind blow through the leaves without rushing or looking at our phones. Time seemed to slow down in places where it doesn't happen very often. He leaned back in his chair with his eyes half closed. People forget how simple happiness can be, I said with a smile into my coffee. Soft music, good weather, warm drinks, and no pretending. Lena stretched her legs across the porch swing, and maybe a guy who actually listens, she teased. He cracked the smallest grin. I listen when it matters. That night he cooked. We thought we'd help, but he gently waved us off, letting us sit at the table while he moved around the kitchen like he'd done it 1,000 times. He told stories from his years traveling, small towns, hidden cafes, moments with strangers who changed him without knowing it. I could see Lena's eyes light up with each one, and mine did too. By the time he brought over the last dish, something had shifted, not just in the air, but in us. It wasn't just about desire anymore. It was comfort, ease, the soft magic of real connection. We ate, we laughed, we passed each other bites and wiped smudges of sauce off noses and cheeks like we'd known each other forever. When the night finally drew close and we curled beneath the same blanket again, it wasn't with urgency, but peace. His hands traced our skin like it was sacred, and we held him like we had found something that didn't need labels or definitions, just truth. I looked at Lena, her eyes filled with something quiet and glowing. I whispered, "This feels like home." She said yes, and he kissed both of us goodnight in a way that felt like a promise. It was the first time in a long time that I fell asleep without worrying or having any thoughts going through my mind. I just felt the warmth of shared breath and a steady, silent kind of joy. Love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Sometimes it comes in quietly, wrapped in moments of laughter, shared glances, and simple breakfasts. Sometimes it starts with curiosity but stays because of kindness, safety, honesty, and truth. If you're lucky, you'll find someone who doesn't just hold you, but also makes you feel held in spirit and heart. Because love isn't about intensity, it's about choosing to be soft, present, and warm every day.